Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Board Now's Cult Television Reviews. And on this video, I will have a double bill of Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 1. You lucky, lucky people. I am spoiling you this week. So, yes, I will be reviewing Episode 9 of the first season, The Puppet Show, and also episode 10 of season 1, and that's called Nightmares. So 2 episodes I rewatched tonight, so I thought I might as well do a double review of them. And actually 2 episodes that I think complement each other quite nicely. Both of them sort of have a horror theme to them. Both, sort of standalone Monster of the Week style, but also do have some stuff going on that you can sort of apply to the show moving forward and building characters, particularly Nightmares. Actually, I think that's fair to say, but sort of mixed on quality, I think, the both of them. And funnily enough, I actually have a bit more to talk about in the Puppet Show, the first of the 2, which is sort of funny. But so yeah, I'm gonna get stuck into them. There's a decent amount to talk about. So the Puppet Show, it's directed by Ellen S. Pressman. First time we've seen her direct an episode. It may well be the last. I don't remember her name popping up again. Certainly for some people that would say something, but I'm going to keep strum on what I think of the episode right now. But, good. It's good to see a female director. I'm assuming quite an early project for her. And it's good to see females get a chance. This is back in the 90s after all. And obviously Buffy, known for pushing its gender boundaries and really being progressive for female characters. So nice to see a female given the chance behind the camera. And of course, in later seasons we get greater female influences on both the writing and directing. People like Marti Noxon, who would write and direct some really good episodes. She of course would become the showrunner in a later season. And some good examples which I'll highlight once we get there. But yeah, Ellen S. Pressman making her Buffy directing debut and perhaps her one and only appearance. Now there's a couple of writers, and they are the brilliant named Rob Des Hotel, only in America folks, and his writing partner for the Puppet Show is Dean Battinelli. I'll go with that if anyone wants to correct me. But again, interesting, these 2 names popping up for the first time. I'm from memory, I think Rob Des Hotel might pop up at least once more, either writing or directing. I'm pretty sure Dean Battinelli doesn't, or Battinelli doesn't. So there you have it. Interesting. So the episode does get a lot of stick from fans. I mean, I think it's one of those niche episodes, probably a bit like The Pack, where the people who really like the Puppet Show really go to bat for it, so they really have a passion and defend it. But on the other hand, it is commonly sort of mocked, and it's seen as a bit of a turkey by some. And obviously I'm going to give away what I think in just a moment, but I'll give a plot sort of synopsis. So there's a school talent show going on. We also have a new principal in town. I'll talk about him in a moment, but Principal Snyder making his debut. And at the time of this talent show, there is a murder. a girl is found dead, and she's found without her heart, basically, and there's suspicion, and a demon is basically killing the students of Sunnydale and taking their organs for harvesting. And obviously part of the mystery is working out why, but also working out who the demon is, and it's sort of a whodunit, who involved, and suspicion falls on this kind of creepy, nerdy sort of guy called Morgan, who has a dummy, Sid, and they're doing like I can't even say the word, but Fragilis act in the I butchered that word, in the talent show. You'll have to con on to what I mean. But yeah, he starts acting all weird and peculiar with the dummy, so the suspicion sort of falls on him. And you can probably guess them, we're going into creepy doll sort of territory, but with a few sort of twists. So that's the basic setup. So it actually has quite an interesting, murder mystery type feel, which I think is part of the appeal of the early seasons. Then they're playing up this sort of noir kind of high school detective type club. And it's a good way to make the Scoobies all sort of active, as you see them question witnesses and potential suspects around the school. And I think that's if you think of a show like Veronica Mars, which I've been watching for the first time recently, I think Buffy can, this idea of a teenage detective club in high school, definitely a big influence on that, because Veronica Mars really takes that and runs with it as one of its core premises. So that's the setup, and I will nail my colours to the mast, because I actually really enjoy this episode. I love it. I just get a blast out of it, and I think part of it might be that it's just a guilty pleasure, and I think it could be for what the passion of the nerd, a fellow YouTuber, likes to call a candy episode. Just one which is, it's kind of rubbish, or it has rough edges and it shouldn't work, but it's just so much of this is personal to you, and it just strikes a chord with me. I just enjoy it a lot and get a lot of fun out of it. There's some good character moments, some really great lines, and actually some quite different things in it. I don't quite get the people who think it's a turkey who outright hate it. I think that's a bit extreme. I don't think it deserves to be put in the same category as my previous review, as I, Robot Eugene, or Teacher's Pet, or some of the later season episodes like Where the Wild Things Are. Beer bad. There's far worse episodes than this. I think this is a solidly watchable episode, and it's just one of those things. It just hits me so much. It strikes me so much. It just speaks to me so much, and I just find it very enjoyable. And I think, sometimes if I'm just watching a random episode and not doing a full rewatch, this is one of those ones I return to a lot, and I think that says something. So, okay, I'm going to be like the defense attorney in this case for the puppet show, and I'm going to talk a bit more about the episode and try to convince you why it's actually a bloody good episode. So here we go. First of all, I actually do like the way it does some like quirky little things with the format of the show, with the structure of the episode. It actually does have these nice little directorial touches and little quirks in the script. So it does it does actually play with convention sort of thing. And I think the first sort of shots are a good example of that, because we enter unusually on kind of a stage, and it's obviously the talent show stage, so we get the sort of the rustle and the sounds of them rehearsing, which I like. I just like that sort of use of sound and that very organic type sound of them jamming, and yeah, very unusual use of sound for a TV show, because obviously often, you know, that they make sure the sound is as clean cut and as clear as possible, so there's something a bit more raw and ambient about this sound. But we also hear the breathing of someone or something, and that kind of opens this up to, you know, being kind of, this is the monster of the week, this is the sort of the murderer, if you want to go that far. And we hear him breathing, and he says some lines which actually I forget now. But then we cut to the hall, and we cut to Mr. Giles has been unwillingly sort of forced into to heading up the talent show, to, you know, obviously sitting through the performances and arranging it all. And he's stuck with Cordelia, and there's some really great Cordelia in this episode. She's really starting to get into a groove now as a character, I feel. So it's an iconically bad version of her singing like a power ballad, and I even forget the title of the song now, but it's a song everyone knows, and it's just this classic sort of opening with her just butchering this thing. And Charisma Carpenter knocks it out of the park, because she just puts so much passion into it, and she's just that character. She's that shallow, you know, superficial character who kind of is in her own headspace. She's in her own world, and she's just so caught up in the performance than she actually kids herself than she can sing, you know. And there's something disingenuous, but because she's so far into it, it just makes it so entertaining. And the icing on the cake is Giles's gone out expression. Yeah, he's just suffering through this. So it's a fun little opener, and it's a nice sort of scene with the Scoobies, because then they come along and they get to mock Giles, because he's been forced into this and he's suffering through Cordelia's song. And yeah, I like his line actually. He mentions the new principal, but he calls her our new Führer. Principal Snyder has insisted I do this sort of thing. So nice use of the word Führer to describe Snyder. But then we run into Snyder, his first appearance. So we have Armand Shinneman, who Star Trek fans will know very well. And yeah, definitely an actor you see pop up in a lot of sci-fi or horror movies. Also was in Seinfeld as Stan the Caddy, but really versatile character actor. And this is a bit of casting they just nail, and he just becomes one of the best supporting characters of the show. He is just so perfect for this weaselly, slimy little principal, this sort of coward of a man, really. But he's just so funny and entertaining with it, so there's something endearing about him as well, which there are to most great sort of like villains. And so he catches the Scoobies in the act. So I sort of like Giles's smile, and the fact that they've been caught essentially mocking the talent show and mocking Giles, and so that's kind of then they're caught in the act by Snyder. And Snyder, Shinneman just nails the line. I mean, he gets the best lines in the episodes. And what I like about this whole interaction is the fact that with just through these lines, the writers have just nailed it. They've just nailed the difference between the last principal, Flutie, who of course got killed off in the pack, and Snyder. They've just transitioned from one principal to a completely new guy. And, Snyder just sums it up really, because he talks about Flutie as a liberal and going in for all this touchy-feely nonsense, and sort of says, well, I'm putting an end to it. Sunnydale High has been touched and felt for the final time, and it's just a great line. I mean, I've got the whole line somewhere. But yeah, he just delivers it perfectly, and I think what it does brilliantly for the episode is it also sets Sunnydale up, it sets Snyder up as a potential villain, as the potential monster of the week, because he's saying these things early on. He's saying, Sunnydale, there's going to be changes around here, Sunnydale. Yeah, basically there's going to be changes around here. And I mean, because he's been introduced and then all these things are happening and the way he appears at certain times throughout the episode, those lines early in the episode are setting up then he could be the monster of the week, essentially. He could be the killer. And so it's a nice sort of red herring, and yeah, it's very cleverly done. It's a great way to debut the character, and really the actor couldn't be more suited. And I do love the contrast between him and Flutie. And there's something very interesting about Snyder as we go along, and I won't give away spoilers in case you're watching it for the first time and you're watching it along with me, but there's something interesting about Snyder as things go on, about the fact that actually he's sort of this in-between character where he's not a direct villain, but he's obviously an antagonist towards Buffy. And it's good to have that sort of regular authority figure in the school who is sort of like he's like a roadblock, he's a hurdle for Buffy, but in a more human sort of way than obviously the demon she faces. But yeah, without giving too much away, there's something very interesting about Snyder, because obviously what happened to Flutie was terrible. So yeah, there's these funny lines, and he's all very casual about the way and saying, well, it's that sort of woody head thinking that got Flutie eaten. And Joel says, oh, I think there's something a bit more complicated than that. And yeah, Snyder just coming out with these great lines, and he's sort of saying, he just says, kids, I hate them, sort of thing. And it's just this ironic sort of character beat, the fact that he's taken over as principal of the school, and apparently hates kids. It's just perfect. It works so well. And he does have a decent run on the show as well, which is good. So we get Morgan and we get Sid, and that's kind of the act. And the gag is then obviously at first he seems really bad and the jokes are really clunky. But then what happens is the dummy actually, it does look convincing. He does start speaking convincingly with a different voice. And then everyone, sits up and starts laughing and is entertained. And obviously we're heading towards the fact that the dummy isn't alive. There is a spirit or something in it, a demon. And that's how the act is so convincing, and Morgan obviously sort of knows this. And you get, some of the cliched kinky dummy sort of jokes, but I have to say that the voice of Sid is quite well done, and I do enjoy a lot of that stuff, even though it's sort of a cliche. And when we get the opening kill, he does have a line you hear before the credits, and it's I will be flesh. So that lays out his sort of intentions. And so that sort of sets up the potential, and suspicion starts falling on Morgan, because when the Scoobies start asking around the school and asking about people in the talent show and what have you, and about Emily, one of them in particular sort of says that Morgan really has been acting strangely, and they sort of spot more and more a pattern with him. And actually, I do think the actor playing Morgan is pretty good. I think he gets across his nervous anxiety very well, and his sort of shy, kind of geeky manner. It's quite a well judged performance, because some of the like the one shot performances in particularly series 1 haven't been good at all. But I think this actor, they do, it's a good bit of casting. I think he's pretty good. And we get some great Cordy stuff again, some great Cordy Xander stuff. So when they're all interviewing different people, Xander, as he points out, gets stuck on Cordy duty. And first of all, Cordy gets it's Emily, the name of the girl who was found, that gets her name wrong, calls her Emma, and Xander has to correct her. And again, it's Cordy being very self-obsessed, and the next time we cut to them, Cordy says, the only thing I could think was that it could have been me, and Xander sort of deadpans, we can dream, which I love. Great delivery. And again, there's more stuff with Snyder. He keeps appearing out of the blue. So Buffy, once they suspect it could be Morgan, Buffy goes to his locker to look for clues, and is basically hoping Sid is going to be in there, or the dummy. But it turns out nothing's there, it's disappeared. But Snyder suddenly appears and confronts her. So throughout the episode, Snyder keeps popping up around the school and in silhouette, which makes him look quite sort of intimidating. And again, he's only just debuted in this episode, so I think it's definitely playing with your expectations the way Buffy does, because with him only appearing in this episode, to the audience, it could well just be a one-shot deal. Thank God it isn't, because he's so great, but that certainly would have been playing on your mind first time around. And there's some quite nice stuff here with Joyce. Joyce is, because they've been forced, the Scoobies have been forced into doing the talent show, and Joyce taking an interest in Buffy, and obviously Buffy, nervous about that. So quite relatable teenage stuff about not wanting their mother to be there and see them embarrassed. Because in a way, it's not like Buffy has been preparing for this, like she has a big interest in stage and what have you. It's obviously been put upon them by the principal, so Buffy is very nervous about this, so that's understandable. And then we get obviously Sid shows up because we see him talking to Morgan, and they've obviously cottoned on to the fact that Buffy is onto them, and they've sort of seen what Buffy can do, and so Sid sort of goes after her, and it's when she's asleep at night, so sort of runs past, and she wakes up quickly. And it's all suspicious, but again, they're playing this angle where Buffy, because she's there, she's pretty sure it's Sid and that the dummy's come to life. But when she says it to the rest the next day at school, they're sort of not buying it, or they're just thinking it's part of her paranoia. And Xander has another killer line when he calls her the dummy slayer, and then backtracks. There's nothing funny about that. And I think they're really playing up this. It's sort of another horror trope, which is why this sort of does remind me of those sorts of horror films. But they're playing up the horror trope, when particularly with dummies and stuff like that, evil dummies, where the characters obviously they haven't seen the threat, so they don't believe that it's real. They believe that it's all fake, so they start mocking the dummy and mocking the monster, or taking it for granted. So we've seen it in some of the Chucky films, because they don't know then Chucky's a live thing. And so it's similar here with the way Xander is mocking Sid, and it's obviously freaking poor Buffy out. But yeah, so he's shouting red rum. It's just fantastic. Another horror reference there. And Xander is full of the references here, because later on he uses Kaiser Soze, which is of course out of The Usual Suspects. So that's another really, I talked about them being quick off the mark in some of their references. Usual Suspects was 1995, and this is like 97, so that's really a quick contemporary reference, which is all very impressive. But yeah, one of the things I really like about this episode is the twists and turns and how it plays with your expectations. So it definitely leads you down the path to think that Sid is going to be the killer, then he is the typical evil doll. But then they pull one out where he actually thinks Buffy's a demon, because they both have the same line and they both do a double take, like, what? And I'm going to defend the direction in this episode, because in the next scene there is a nice bit of direction where Sid is basically explaining the story to them, how he's a demon hunter essentially, and he's almost doing like a similar role to Buffy. And so it's panning across them in the library, and Giles and the Scoobies are just looking gone out as Sid is telling this story, and it's just sort of dawning on them. And yeah, how it's his mission to sort of break this spell. Then this particular demon is looking for human organs to harvest and to become alive, to become human essentially, and that it's kind of Sid's sort of mission to sort of break the spell. And he's been trapped in this, like, the doll's body ever since. So we actually find out, quite sadly, then it'll mean that's the end of him essentially. He doesn't become free. He breaks the spell, but he actually dies. And it's, there's some fun stuff, because we find out that he knew a previous Slayer, says she's Asian, was quite hot, but again, that particular Slayer is someone who we're introduced to in a later episode in a flashback. So I guess there's some nice sort of building of mythology going on there. But yeah, I do like the way they play the audience with the viewer with the twist and turn. Now I have to say, one letdown is if you're thinking of this as sort of a murder mystery type, whodunit type plot, I think that falls a bit flat because it turns out then it's the guy doing magic in the talent show. He's obviously the demon, and he targets Giles in a memorable sort of scene because Giles obviously very brainly, so he gets him to take part in his trick where he obviously brings down the sort of sharp lever on his head, and that's how he plans on getting his brain. And they obviously figure him that out, so that's like the organ he needs is the brain. But yeah, I suppose it's a bit of a flat sort of turn, you know. I think it's obviously a bit of a problem because it's just maybe a twist for the sake of it, and I think it's just one of those episodes because it's a one-off, because we only see this guy, the magician, in this episode. Then it's actually very difficult to make us care and make us interested and to be shocked at the twist. I mean, in a way, the real twist is the fact that it's Giles. Then he's gone after Giles and he's gone after the brain. That sort of twist. You know, Giles obviously is helping out in the talent show. So yeah, the twist does fall a bit flat because there's nothing invested in the guy to make us go, oh my god, you know, sort of thing. So that doesn't really work. And then there's some cheesy, you know, action again, which I kind of enjoy. It's quite good fun. Again, I think this is the side of the guilty pleasure that just tickles me. And I will mention actually one more thing with Giles, because he has another great scene with Cordy where she's rambling on about her performance and, you know, how it should go on. I think it's, yeah, she's saying it should go on before there's like a rock and roll performance because the song is sappy, so no one's going to feel sappy after all that rock and roll. And Giles does this trick on her to get her to basically back off and go away, and he just stares at her and says, oh, it's your hair. And she then, very caught up in herself, oh, is there something wrong with it? And leaves. And Giles says, Xander was right, worked like a charm. So the comedy is just so on point in this episode. And it's good that we're getting more of Cordy. But again, I mean, I was speaking about how it sort of plays with form and with structure, and that, you can see that at the end. I mean, after they've killed the demon and Sid's obviously done his sacrifice, the curtain goes down and the audience are already there, so they're kind of watching this like just after the fact. I mean, the curtain sort of, or goes up, I should say. The curtain goes up just at the right moment. I mean, you know, if it'd been like a couple of seconds earlier, yeah, they would have been caught in the act. But as it is, they're up on the stage, they've just done their thing. So it looks like a performance. And again, Snyder has another great line, because he's in the audience. He's like, I don't get it. And then it cuts to an unusual sort of closing, because we actually get the credits at the side of the screen. So then we see Buffy, Xander and Willow doing their performance, which is some sort of play, some sort of performance art, and it's like a spoken word thing, Ebonus or something it's called. And So yeah, they're on the one side of the screen, and the credits are on the other side, and you don't get the normal the Buffy theme, the Nerf theme, theme. Sorry. So it's unusual. It does break it up and make it a different sort of feel, and I think it's intentional. It's a wink to the audience because this is a stage performance, so it's almost kind of breaking that down and giving it more of a stage sort of feel, rather than obviously how you would end a TV show where you cut to black and then the credits sort of come in. So it's a clever scene. It's a nice little ending, and Willow, obviously, it sets something up for Willow as well, actually, for the next episode. So it sets up her sort of stage fright, because they're dressed in like this medieval gear, and she actually, she's too nervous, so she sort of runs off the stage, and Xander and Buffy sort of then go together to fill the gap. But so I like as well, then it sets up Willow's stage fright, and we see more of that, as I said, in Nightmares and in future seasons. Actually, it's something that is referenced quite a lot, particular season 4 episode. So that is The Puppet Show, episode 9. I've given a strong defence of it, I think. I do really like it. And that moves me on to Nightmares, which is the 10th episode of the first season. And again, this is interesting on the creative side. Now, Bruce Seth Green directs it, so this is his 3rd episode this season. And he's had mixed results. The first episode he directed was Teacher's Pet, which was terrible. And the second episode he directed was The Pack, which again is one that divides people. I kind of enjoy it, despite some of the flaws. But other people seem to hate it. It does seem to be one similar to the Puppet Show. But again, you sort of wonder if he isn't the best director, because obviously Teacher's Pet wasn't great or was bad. And The Pack, though it was generally much better, does have weak moments in it. And certainly some of his direction in this isn't the best. But then we kind of have Joss Whedon and David Greenwalt sort of collaborating together on this. So Greenwalt does the teleplay and Whedon has the story, so they kind of shared it. It's unusual for that to sort of happen. Normally it would come up with just who sort of wrote it, but it's interesting because they're obviously collaborating at this point, and they would go on to create Angel, the spin-off. So obviously Whedon we know about. Greenwalt so far, I mean, he wrote Teacher's Pet, but he also wrote Angel, which I reviewed a couple of videos ago, which was a much stronger script. So yeah, he's finding his feet, but certainly you can see a lot of potential, and there is potential in this episode. And I go back and forth on Nightmares. You know, I used to really like it, and then for a while I really hated it. Because a lot of people seem to like it, and it always seemed to be one of the weaker, certainly season 1 episodes. And now I'm a bit more mixed on it. I think it's somewhere in the middle, maybe. There's things I enjoy about it, things I don't like so much, but I think one thing about it is then it sort of sums up partly what Buffy is as a show. I think I think it really taps into that idea of confronting your fears about, I mean, obviously the first season is largely about high school and bullying and stuff like that, and about, the need to confront that in life. But also just the fact that Buffy as a show, the idea behind it was a feminist sort of statement about, obviously females traditionally cast as like damsels in distress. So this idea then it's flipped around. It is the pretty blonde girl who turns the tables on the guys and on the demons, and it's actually her who gets to kick butt. So yeah, it does play into this, the fact that this episode is about confronting your fears. And that's the basic plot, really. We get to see the Master again, which is good because he's been popping in and out, and he does have a bit more of an active role, and he sets this in motion. So he sort of sets this spell along with the annoying one, who's useless as always. He sets up this, but they set this spell up, which is that the worst fears of the students of Sunnydale are starting to come to life, and that it puts them in grave danger, and it kind of, the Master is then able to appear to Buffy, and if she can't overcome her fears, essentially he will become reality. He will be real. He will be out. I mean, he's real anyway, but he's at the moment trapped under the surface. He can't come out. So that's kind of his plan. And then there's a plot involving a young boy, Billy, who he's kind of the face of all what's going on around the school, and he's been targeted in a particular way. So his sort of, I guess, human thing kind of links to all the fears. So I'll get into that stuff. But it's a very mixed episode. I mean, it's very watchable. There's a lot of good stuff going on, but there's a lot of bad things that sort of drag it down. And I think part of it is just, and it's quite cheesy. It feels like a bit of a sketch show. So we go through their sort of nightmares, and it's a bit like a sketch show where some of them are more effective than others. And it is a bit hit and miss in that sense. There's some big moments for Buffy in the episode, some big character moments. And also Billy, I didn't really care about. The casting was really bad with Billy, but I do have a few comments to make about it. So this is set up in the first scene, these nightmares. So Wendell, who's a friend of theirs in school, even though we've never met him, it's another one of these where he's just introduced and we're expected to just take on board then he's their friend, essentially. Even though we've never seen him before, we never see him again. But they're in class anyway. He starts reading the book that they're studying, and suddenly spiders appear. And he kind of says later that he doesn't fear spiders. He freaks out, but he says he doesn't fear them. He doesn't hate them, let's say, is his words. But they hate him, sort of thing, which is why they go after him. So I guess that sort of becomes his fear. And so the fears, we see all sorts of fears. So Giles suddenly can't read, which means he can't help the Scoobies with this. And Anthony Sturhead does a great job of selling that. We see that set up in one of the early scenes where they walk in the library and he's actually lost. Doesn't really have his bearings, so there's that stuff. we return to Willow and her stage fright. So it's quite late on, actually. We get this like fantasy sequence where she suddenly appears on the stage with like a great opera singer, and she has to sing with him, sort of thing, and she can't get the words out. So again, it's building on what we saw in the last episode. Xander and his fear of clowns, which he eventually confronts, and I do love that scene. It's sort of bringing up memories of his birthday party when he was younger, and apparently he was chased by a clown, which is hilarious. But again, it's playing on this idea of clowns actually being scary. And there's no doubt that it's referencing Stephen King's It as well. But yeah, it's a cool character beat moment for Sander, the fact that he gets to just nail this clown. The clown's running after them, and he turns around and just pops in one and says, "Your balloon animals were lousy." So it's a nice little moment for Sander. Then he confronts it and gets to pop this clown one. And Cordy we see with her hair. There's a very 80s vibe to a lot of this, and I think this is why it feels a little cartoonish, because we see like these punks who are normally bullies, and they're looking all very 1980s. They're wearing jackets, they got their sunglasses, so they look like the Fonz sort of thing. But they're being sort of bullies, and then suddenly one of their mums comes along and is giving him all this and like, yeah, sort of telling him off, so it becomes like an embarrassing moment. So that's kind of his fear. And so you gain all this stuff around school, and as I said, some of it works better than other stuff. But there's a couple of particular moments for Buffy. I mean, it obviously focuses most on her because everything is going wrong for her, and it's set in motion early. So we get more background on her dad, Hank. This is the first time we meet him. Obviously, him and Joyce are separated. And we get some background, because he's coming to meet her for the weekend, and they have this schedule where they meet every so often, and they go to a show. I think it's to a show, I can't quite remember. But he keeps letting her down. He often calls and says, "I can't, I've got work." And as we find out, Hank is the worst, folks. There's just certain characters that you just hate from the off, and I think Hank is one of them. But we do get a bit more background because Buffy is telling Willow, maybe my slaying didn't help, even though obviously Joyce and Hank wouldn't have known about that. I think the fact that in the previous town, Buffy was the Slayer, and she would have been distant because of that and dealing with that issue. So she kind of says, well, that could have played a part, sort of thing. But yeah, then there were other factors as well. So we do get a little bit more background. And so it is the personal side of Buffy that I think really sells this episode and really carries it. Some of the other stuff you could have cut out. And I think Buffy is the heart of the episode, and it's what makes the episode stand out a little bit more. A couple of scenes in particular. I will just make a comment actually on Cordy in this episode, because there's a really interesting scene. So Buffy basically has a history test which she doesn't know about, and so when they're outside talking, Cordy reminds her about the history test, and Buffy's like, "I have a history test? What history test?" And then they go inside, and Buffy doesn't know. I mean, she walks over to Cordy, but she essentially doesn't know where the history test is. And so Cordy says, "It's in here." And Cordy's actually being quite nice to her in this scene, uncharacteristically nice. But it does become part of Buffy's nightmare. So my question to you, and you can answer it in the comments below, give your take on it, is this a moment for Cordy? Is she actually being nice to Buffy? Does this really happen is the question basically, or is all of it part of the dream? See, in a way I sort of choose to maybe think that the nightmare only starts once Buffy gets to the exam, or is inside the exam. I mean, because Cordy sort of says, makes a comment about it's not surprising you didn't know, or you don't know where it is because you hardly show up here. So that is kind of indicating that Buffy has been preoccupied. And I mean, again, depending on how you choose to read it, it's also a nice little suggestion that Cordy is starting to take more interest in schoolwork and is starting to become less shallow, if you like. So, I mean, depending on if you think this is real or part of the dream. I mean, even if it is part of the dream, I actually still think it is saying something up with Cordy, because Cordy's just her nickname, but Cordelia. But it is actually, this is starting her sort of progression, her character arc. And you do see it nearer the end of this season, where she is slowly moving towards I mean, if you like the good side, it's obviously wrong to call Cordy a villain, but obviously, again, a bit like Snyder, she is like an antagonist to like the core group of characters. But yeah, that's slowly changing as this season draws to an end. So I think you could say, whether it's a dream or not, it is starting to set that up in this scene where she's actually looking out for Buffy a bit. And I mean, another sort of retro touch, which actually I enjoy, is when Laura, this schoolgirl, she goes to the basement to have a fag, to have a cigarette, and she's lurched on by this ugly sort of troll, this monster. And actually, because she is sort of beaten down, as this is happening, the camera cuts to like a sign saying "smoking kills," and it's actually got a gun, and it's quite an animated sign, which I did kind of enjoy. And actually, this is an interesting thing, I think, about the episode, where you can see, you can tell, I think, that Whedon and Greenwalt both worked on it. I think you can see their contrasting styles sort of working together, which is maybe why at times it is a little bit of a mess. But yeah, you can maybe see some of the darker ideas that Greenwalt tends to have sort of working through. Because obviously in this scene, you know, Laura sort of is beaten down, and then you get the abuse stuff later with Billy. But yeah, focusing on Buffy again, I think her scenes are really what carry the episode. So the scene with Hank is just a standout. It's just so heartbreaking, and it's just so painful to watch. And again, it reminds me of Willow in the pack, her scene with Xander when he says that line to her, and just watching Willow's reaction is just so devastating. And I think it just shows you, I mean, in this case, it's a really well played scene anyway, so you probably would have that. But I think you have it even more because you're invested in Buffy, you care about her. And I think that just shows you why it's important to have great characters in these shows, to have characters you care and root for because of scenes like this. So it's just like, in a way, her worst nightmare come true, where her dad is just really nasty to her, really mean. He sits her down, says he's being honest, and he blames it on her, him and Joyce getting the divorce. And Buffy slowly reacts to it, says, as we see her processing through the facial expressions what's going on. And she just has this look of terror as Hank says, it's all your fault coming home to you every day. And then he says, I really don't get anything out of these get-togethers, so I think it would be best if we stop them. And just Buffy having to process all that and the pain of it, and it's just great reactionary acting from Sarah Michelle Gellar, and it just sums up the theme of the episode and what a nightmare really is, sort of thing. And it just cuts to your heart, really. Such a powerful scene. And obviously, I think as you're watching it, you can figure out that it is a nightmare. It's not really sort of happening. But even so, just watching it is just so hard, and the emotion of it. And I think there are little hints that Sarah Michelle Gellar, she's good from the start, pretty much. She's there, but obviously, this first season isn't the most, doesn't have the most depth, and things really progress from here on out. So, although she's very good, I think it's a slower sort of process, her being given really meaty, really emotional scenes. And there's a great example in the final episode of the season, Prophecy Girl. But this is one of those scenes actually where, you can tell this is a really talented actress, the way she reacts to this scene and what's going on. And you just feel so bad for her. And the other big thing for her is later on, where the Master comes out and she's like, well, it's just a dream, you're not here. And that's when he explains to her, dreams are based on real fear, sort of thing. And he's essentially saying, if you can't beat them, then I am real, sort of thing. And she then becomes a vampire, essentially. The Master attacks her and she becomes a vampire, and that's kind of her worst dream come true, becoming a vampire, being defeated by her fear. So it's good to see Mark Metcalf given a bit more as the Master in this episode. And Buffy's fear comes true in that, and ultimately they break the cycle because they get Billy to confront his fear, because it's with him that all this has started. He lost a game, or his Little League team lost a game, and his coach blamed Billy even though he just one player. And so again we get some darker stuff. Billy is abused by the Little League coach, and so it's Billy standing up to the monster that breaks the cycle, essentially, and everyone snaps out of the dream. So the actual monsters we see, and it's a very sort of Grimm's fairy tale style monster. I think that's something the episode is playing up again. But then it's kind of like this sort of neat moral sort of message, him kind of standing up to the coach at the end, and the Scoobies grabbing the coach, Xander grabbing him. Xander and Giles, actually, and obviously they bring him to justice. So stuff like that I'm not so keen on. It's like this sort of forced bit of emotion, the fact that he was being abused by his coach. And again, Billy's a character introduced in this episode who we're not really invested in, and the actor just isn't very good. But So stuff like that, it feels very much it's just for the sake of this one off and a bit forced. But there's certainly good things in the episode. It's a solid episode, probably a mid-ground episode, I'd say. It does do some important stuff for Buffy at least. So there you have it. That's a double bill of the puppet show and also Nightmares. So feel free to let me know and pose any questions in the comments below. I suppose I should rate them. Normally do them like stars, 5 stars or 5 steaks. And again, I'm gonna pull no punches. I really enjoy the puppet show. So I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars. I'm gonna go quite high on it, just purely for my level of enjoyment. So 3.5 stars for the puppet show, and Nightmares is somewhere more in the middle. The stuff I like, I tend to really like, and the stuff I don't like does drag it down. So I'll give it 2.5. I think 2 stars would be a bit harsh because it doesn't deserve to be put with, some of the trash like Teacher's Pet and even iRobot. It's sort of good enough that it's watchable, but it's not great. It's not. It probably is on the lower end of this season, but it's solid enough for what it is. So 2.5 stars for Nightmares. So if you agree with those ratings or you have different thoughts, then please let me know, and I will return with a new episode review soon. We're getting close to the end of season 1, so next time another sort of monster of the week, but another episode that sort of has a link to the themes of the season, and that is Out of Mind, Out of Sight. So another interesting episode, which I do sort of have a soft spot for. So that'll be my next review, and I'll see you again soon for these Buffy reviews. Goodbye.